Hi, everybody. Welcome. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about family systems. So, who has familiarity with family systems from previous discussions? Okay, quite a few of us in here, so that's great. We're going to review the roles in the family system. Much of that material has been around for a while. We're going to talk about where the roles come from, and then we're going to talk about how to utilize roles in our clinical work. It can be profound value for folks. So first, we'll talk about why the roles have some utility and value. What's the primary purpose of group therapy? Anybody know? Bonding, safety, yeah. And so another way of putting all that is the core value of group is that it demonstrates to group members that they're not alone. Okay, so the idea that I am not terminally unique. Most people who have an addiction are afraid that there is something unique about them. The other benefit of group when it's psychoeducation like this is I'm creating concepts, I'm putting words to concepts that allow somebody to have an aha moment. And once you have a word for something, an understanding of something, there's a settling that takes place, sort of a normalizing that takes place. And so it's really, really helpful. And you'll see that clinically, it's called a recognition reflex. When I say something to a client and they go like that, eyes wide and anything like that, and it's really fun to do. Police do this all the time during interrogation where they bounce things around and they'll hit them with something and they look for the reflex. It's really hard to hide a recognition reflex unless you're pretty sophisticated as a liar. So that's one of the things that can be really interesting to see. Recognition reflexes, they tell the truth. They're an instantaneous response to new data. Now, it doesn't tell you what the orientation to that data necessarily means. It only tells you that orientation to the data fit, it landed, something was interesting, and something recontextualized within the individual who had the recognition reflex and the corresponding orientation response. When we're talking about family systems, the value of that for the client is typically it gives them a sense of, oh, this is a category into which I might fall. And as a result of falling into that category, I have more of a place, and the underlying belief is that what's happening for me is normal. Now, all of us also are a little bit narcissistic, right? We're all a little bit selfish, and we all want to be very, very special, like snowflakes. So the thing with snowflakes is everyone is completely different, just like everybody else, okay? So it's sort of an ironic, sort of a double bound thing, but we all kind of want to be snowflakes. So it can have the other effect as well. Some people will be opposed to the idea of patterns emerging in family systems, and that's fine also. Another thing that's really interesting is this is not a study of pathological family systems. So how do we decide the difference between a pathological family system and a family system that is healthy, whatever that word means? Super simple, actually, surprisingly simple, and very few of us typically will have this in our education. When I have a constellation of family members, and this can be extended family, I have a group or family system. A healthy system works for the good of the individual and the individuals within that system. A healthy system will flex and move and adapt and work for the good of all of the individuals in that system. An unhealthy family system is one in which the group, the individuals work for the good of the group. Okay? If this creates a reciprocal relationship, if the system works for the good of the individual, what happens to the individual? In attachment terms, we call it a secure relationship. In essence, as an individual, I believe that I have a secure, aka protective relationship with a tribe. And then I am obligated to work really hard to make sure that that stays around. And I'm going to do my best to take care of that tribe. I'm going to show up with hopefully some gratitude. I'm going to show up and do my best to serve that larger group. On the other hand, in this situation where the individual exists for the group, okay, no longer reciprocal. It is a one-way relationship, and it is a taking relationship, and it kind of sucks the life out of the individual. So does that make sense? On a side note, that can be applied on a macro level as well. Larger and larger levels, we can do that. But long story short, A healthy family system services the individual within the family. An unhealthy family system, the individual has to serve the system. Okay? Yeah. So for a lot of us, that's going to land right away. Like, oh, got it. And also, particularly, there's generally one or two individuals in the system who have a majority of the power and the control, and around whom the system will rotate. In an unhealthy family system, there will be a consistent constellation, and around that constellation, everybody else, there's a sun in any constellation, right? Everybody else is going to rotate. In a healthy family system, the sun changes and can move around and can be flexible. An example I can think of is I had some friends, and they had a young daughter. She was, I think, 14 or 15. And these guys were pretty conservative people. You know, they were very religious. And one day she decided she was going to go to school all dressed in black, right? She went from kind of regular, sort of typical teenage stuff to goth.
Nice.
And their response was, okay. And guess what? She went to school all dressed in black for about 6 months. And then the next thing, I don't actually remember what the next sort of significant shift in identity was. You know, loose jeans and kind of a stoner look. And well, all right. And she did what teenagers do. She tried on several different identities until she found one that she liked. And in this case, it happened to be one that was pretty pro-system, right? She came back around. But it's a good example, a small example, of a family system that said, well, we're going to adjust. You know, there's going to be some limits, but we're going to go ahead and adjust our circumstances for your preferences because we can. What does it cost us for you to go to school all dressed in black? And in other situations, maybe that wouldn't be the case, right? I'm in a family system that's very image conscious, in a small, tight-knit religious community. My daughter goes to school dressed in a goth outfit. My response might be very different. In this case, she had a pretty healthy family system. I actually really always admired that particular family. I thought they were really solid and well put together, and that's one of the reasons why. Certainly, there are other family systems where it goes differently, and that's what a lot of our clients, and a lot of us, frankly, coming out of family systems where one or two individuals have a lot of power. Which plays in to the next piece. You have a quick question?
Yes. So it almost makes you say that this functional pathological system, it essentially exists to serve one person usually, but that it becomes almost, I guess the word would be like, it presents as being in the interest of the collective, but it's really serving the one person, because the one person's needs or image or whatever, you serve everyone else. That kind of accurate?
Yeah, I think that's accurate, and it exists on a spectrum. So the question is it safe to say that a dysfunctional family system exists to serve one and only one person? And you can actually serve 2 or 3 or 4 of the people in the family system. It gets pretty complex. Usually there is a hierarchy, and usually it's pretty steady. The most important thing is that it stifles the individual from creativity and from a sense of purpose and belonging. And also, the other thing about an unhealthy family system is if you mess with it, it'll throw you out. Okay? And all family systems, to some degree, have limits and bounds. The more rigid the limits, the more significant we're talking here. So another way of looking at family systems, we have over here we have enmeshed, and over here we have disengaged. Now, what do we mean when we say enmeshed versus disengaged? In an enmeshed family system, I feel your feelings. I feel your experiences. When you're sad, I'm sad. There's really a hazy boundary between you and me. In a disengaged family system, I don't feel really anything. I remember a client one time, they would go on family vacations and they'd all go in different rooms and read. That was it. They'd go visit people when they weren't together with other people in the family. They would just sit in different rooms and read. There's very minimal interaction. Or I can think of another family system, and the dad in this case was autistic. Okay, and in this case, the client was a boyfriend, and he was hanging out with his girlfriend, and she was really, really upset. And dad came home and said, "Oh, I'm tired. I don't know what this is, but I'm going to bed." He was really, really surprised and horrified and shocked and hurt wounded. And the girlfriend in this case said, oh, okay. Never thought to be upset with her dad because that's not part of her serving the system. Okay. So that's a disengaged family system. Okay. Now on the other side, and so everybody can look at this, and I can put my family in a kind of a dot here. I can say, well, my family system, we were pretty enmeshed, or my family system, we were pretty disengaged. Okay. And now on the other side, we go with rigid or permissive. Now, a rigid family system has really, really strict goals and rules and guidelines. And there's really, really tight confines about what's acceptable and what's not. In this example I was mentioning earlier, the family with the autistic father figure, the father figure with Asperger's. Highly, highly rigid, highly structured environment. And the reason is because dad's autistic and there's sort of a narrow margin of activity that he can handle before he can start to lose his stuff. Okay? The other extreme is permissive. How many of you guys in high school, either your parents were those parents, or you knew the kid whose parents bought everybody beer? Come on over to my house and party. Woo! Some of you guys were that kid, but almost everybody knew that kid. We all had that kid. That's a permissive parent, where my parent is really kind of my friend, or just sort of neglectful, not particularly interested. Hey, clean up your mess and make sure nobody calls the cops, and we'll see you tomorrow. Your mom and I are going out of town. Okay? So now you can take a look at your family system and you can put a dot in this area. You're rigid, you're permissive. Closer we are to the middle, okay? I don't think there's going to be a family system that's in the middle, at least not one that stays there for a long time. And of course, our dots can move a little bit. So maybe this is, I'm this permissive and this disengaged. A delightful family where I got to do whatever I wanted to do. I had a family member, when they were young, their parents said, well, you're 12 now. If the cops call, if you end up in jail, don't call. And there's a downstairs. This is your room. I'll see you on Sunday. That was it. Highly permissive, highly disengaged. Not particularly helpful. Being 12 years old and on your own is pretty freaking scary, right? And you got a lot of time. You got to grow up fast. Not a lot of time to have a bunch of lunchroom drama. You got to go get a job so you can get some clothes to wear, right? So that's a significant issue. So when we're talking about a healthy family system, we're talking about one that kind of falls into this zone here. Maybe this zone here will help. So now we have an idea of the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy family system. There's a couple of really important concepts there. Let's talk about adaptation strategies that show up in every family system, regardless of its level of health. Now, the rigidity to which these adaptation strategies are adhered to does shift depending on how functional or unfunctional a family system is. But the same core 5 or 6 roles show up. Now, there's one thing I want to mention. I'm trained in a model that comes, I think it's Claudia Black took it from Virginia Satir, I believe. And Satir was a student of Alfred Adler. So you can go back, and Adler and Freud and Jung were all this first group. Adler was really the guy behind the family theory stuff. Now, Bowlby did the attachment work, but Adler really looked at the family system as a whole. And so most family therapy, if you're a licensed marriage and family therapist, you're going to have studied quite a bit of Adler and Adlerian theory in college. So that's really what we're talking about here. Now, there have been some variations of this that have 6 or 7 roles in the family system. I tend to keep it a little bit on the simpler side, and we'll see why in a second, because you can combine the roles and get some good sense and logic out of it. Is there a question over here at one point?
I was just asking, these are adaptation strategies that show up in adulthood?
Great question. And I'll get to the answer in a minute. The question was, are these adaptation strategies that show up in adulthood? They actually show up really early, and then they will shift a couple of times in significant moments of development, as far as I can tell. We'll talk about that in a second. So the first role in the family system is the hero. Now, Adler started off with birth order. Okay, that's Adler. Satir studied family systems and made roles, and then Claudia Black, I believe, made them more specific to addiction. Okay, so that's the progression here, and we're really working with Claudia Black's material. So the hero in the family system is often, in an Adlerian sense, a firstborn. Now, it's important to understand there's some provisos if we're talking about a firstborn child. For example, your birth order is determined during the first 6 years of your life. So if you were an only child until you were 7, and then your parents married, your mom married a different dad with a bunch of other kids, and you end up with a bunch of other kids in your thing, you're still going to be an only child as far as birth order goes. Also, if there's more than 6 years difference between you and the next sibling, 6 or more years, you're going to reset the count. So if we have 2 kids, a 7-year gap, and 2 more kids, that third kid isn't a thirdborn. That third kid's a firstborn. So that's an important point. There's different characterizations in Adlerian therapy for the firstborn, a middle, and a lastborn. Okay? This is traditionally the role, the hero role is traditionally the role played by the firstborn. The firstborn grows up in an environment where there's just him or her. Right? Everybody, if you look through the old family photo albums, back before everybody took a billion pictures, back in the day, they would have photo albums. And if you take a look at somebody, if you're a firstborn kid from my generation, you look at your photo albums, there's 600 pictures of you. Okay. The next kid gets a couple of pictures. Okay. By the third kid, they're just in with everybody else if they get in the photo at all. Okay. And the fourth kid, good luck. And there's, right, but there's a real system to that in that all the first experiences are going to happen to the firstborn, and they're much more likely to become a hero in the family system simply because they're the biggest, they're the strongest, and they're the smartest of the siblings by merit, usually. And again, this is all this stuff is only true about 80% of the time, as far as I can tell. So usually, they're the biggest, the strongest, and the smartest. And that means they're going to be more responsible, they're going to act more adult-like. They're often going to believe that it's their obligation to wave the crest of the family in public, right? So they're going to be image-focused. They're going to be achievement-focused a lot of the time. They're going to say, hey, everybody, look at me. And they're going to take the values that the family system has, and they're going to try to max out those values. And oftentimes, they'll try to kind of outdo their rival, who often is their dad, if there's a dad in the family system or something like that. They're very much going to be driven to be successful, perhaps more so than other members of the family. And that's the hero. So they really, really are driven for success. Now, here's an important point. Success for different families means different things. Okay? In my family, it meant you went to college. I don't think I even realized I had the option to not go to college until I'd already graduated. It just literally never once occurred to me the whole take a year off and all that crap. None of it. Because in my family, it was drilled in right away. You're going to be, neither of my parents went to college. Everybody decided I was going to be the great white hope of the family, which is a super typical firstborn thing. It's fine. And you're going to college. You're getting, now, the other downside of this, the firstborn will also complain, especially for the laterborns, that they also have the biggest challenges to overcome as far as discipline and parental concern. Okay, I didn't drive till I was 18. Now, part of that, a lot of that was my choice, truth be told, but like all the rules are very strict. My sister, they're like, go to Europe, have a good time. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Okay? A little bit of a different story the further down we go. So the firstborn has all the rules and all the attention, but that by itself is a pretty valuable thing to notice, and it has responses that are both positive and negative. So the hero is very much the success of the family system. The middle child is a mediator, okay? And a mediator wants to have peace. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't finish this point up here about success. So when you're talking about success, different families have different ideas of what that means. My family, you go to college. Some families, you enter a trade. Some families, you're the first one in the family to become a made man. Okay, you knock off Guido or whatever it is going to be. That's the thing in your family system. You know, we're a mafia family. You're going to be in the mob. You're going to do a great job of running an organized crime ring. So it's different for every family. The hero will take that sense of success and they'll run with it. And a lot of times they'll even try to improve on it. They're very driven as individuals. The mediator just wants a lot of peace. They have to negotiate between a younger sibling and an older sibling. And they learn very quickly that peace is the ultimate direction. Mediators are very, very stable. They tend to get into a job and keep it for a very long time in adulthood. They tend to have a small number of relationships. Heroes don't usually have as much time for relationships as other folks. They're busy achieving things. And their relationships are often built around mutual achievement. Teammates are their friends. Okay? But when the season's over, sometimes it's on to some new friends and some new stuff. Like I got work to do. Are you coming along for the ride? Whereas a mediator, the relationships, there'll be a small number of very deep relationships. They're very, very key in that situation. They can be a little bit overlooked sometimes. They'll tell you at times that they have felt a bit neglected. Not always, but some of the time. They tend to be peaceful and enjoyable and settled. Sometimes they'll take a lot of crap, maybe more so than they should in relationships. And then the last born is the mascot. And the mascot's goal is to be fun and cute. That's really what it is. And everybody here thought of the youngest child in their family system. A couple of you are the youngest child in your family system. Woohoo! I'm the mascot of, and by the way, every group of people will create a family system. I'm the mascot in my environment. Look at me, everybody. I'm cute. I like to be the center of attention. However, I do not like pain. I do not like discomfort. So not only won't you won't see it, but I won't see it either. I'm going to do my best to avoid it. They tend to be a little on the less responsible side of things. They tend to have credit cards, and those credit cards tend to carry a balance in life. And that's both literally and figuratively. Okay, they party harder than everybody else, and they're quite willing to set aside pesky responsibilities because in their life, a lot of times they are babied. They're insulated from consequences. Yeah. Go ahead, question?
So if the firstborn, secondborn, 2 years apart, and then the thirdborn's another 5 years. I know it's not that 6-year mark, but is it possible being that 5.5 years, you could fall back into that firstborn role?
It's possible, and depending on the family system. It all depends on the disengaged piece and the if the family system is pretty driven to do something else or has a goal or a direction to it, yeah, absolutely. If the family system's enmeshed, on the other hand, now you just have 4 parents, okay? And so you're going to just be, you're never going to have any consequences for anything. It's a great time. And you get to have fun and be cute. It seems great. The challenge with the mascot is that people don't take them seriously and they feel that and they get kind of frustrated about it. Go ahead with the question.
Yeah, so the hero role is the oldest, right?
Yeah.
So, is it? Conversation.
No, you're the hero in your family system? I would never guess that.
Formally.
You resigned your position.
I resigned that command several years ago. But is it possible? A lot of times, I would think it would happen there is that if it's a dysfunctional family system where there's a lot of pressure on the oldest born, like you had mentioned, your job like squad will look to take it to the next level.
Totally.
But usually, I would think that would come, and if I'm right, is that whoever it may be, the patriarch or matriarch that's running that ship is going to basically absolve them of the responsibility and put it all onto the kid. Because if it was, hey, you have to turn out just like me, well, then that's on me to show you how to be me. But you got to be better than me. I don't know how to do that, so you got to figure it out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the nuances of the roles pretty soon. But yeah, absolutely. The hero unconsciously will usually seek to supplant the same sex, if it's a heterosexual person, the same sex parent, in kind of a Freudian way, actually. It's a little, but it just is what it is. Everybody thinks, oh, Freud, gross with the Oedipal thing, but there appears to be some logic to that. And we can talk sometime about biologically why that makes sense. I don't want to get too far off on that bunny trail right now. But if you ask me to, at the end of the lecture, we'll talk about family systems and how biologically having that built in makes a ton of sense. It's really a smart move from the survival of the species perspective. But let's come back to that. That's a great question. So hero, success, mediator is peaceful, mascot's goal is fun and cute. Now these are, as a group, these are heroic roles. They're variations on a theme. I wish I had a better word for them than this. This isn't, we're stepping away from these guys and into kind of my own stuff, and we'll come back to this in a minute in terms of why it's important. Another way of putting them is, maybe we'll call it desired roles. Desired by the family and by the kid. Okay, these are roles that I will willingly take. Now again, it's only about 80% of the time that the birth order part of it shows up. And the next question is going to be, because we have 2 more roles to go, the next question is going to be, what if we don't have 5 kids in the family? Are we going to have, and the reality is all these roles blend together. And we'll talk about specific ways, times, and development when they blend in a minute. So hero, mediator, mascot. Up next, we have the scapegoat. Now, the scapegoat in the family system is literally the anti-hero. Literally, that's the Thanos to the family's Iron Man. For those of you who like the Marvel movies, I love the Marvel movies. And there's something deeply sort of archetypical about it. The scapegoat loathes the hero and really thinks the hero is a coward because the hero has to conform to the needs of the family system and is driven by people pleasing and wanting people to think well of them image-wise. And the scapegoat looks at the hero and says, you are a coward. And they do the exact opposite. So we talked earlier about how success is different things for different families. If I come from a family of FBI agents, the scapegoat is the drug dealer. Okay? And we've had these clients, right? I had a kid one time who's, dad was the police chief of a very large city. He's all tatted up and dealt drugs and had a great time of it. The belief of the hero, of the scapegoat rather, is that if I scream loud enough, someone will notice me. Okay. The other belief of the scapegoat is that being good doesn't pay off. I don't get the attention I need by being good. And there can be a lot of ways for that story to show up. One of the ways is if I'm a mediator and everybody pays attention to the hero, and I think, well, look, he's bigger than me. He's smarter than me. He's faster than me. What do I got to gain here? How am I going to win in this battle? Well, I know what I can do. The exact opposite of what that guy does. He's doing good, I'm going to do bad. Okay? So the scapegoat is, and I see some smiles. So if you're smiling right now when I'm talking about the scapegoat being the anti-hero, it's because you're a scapegoat. Spoiler alert, it's because you were a scapegoat in your family system. Okay? And there is a glee, a sense of deep glee and joy and satisfaction from being bad. Hey, everybody, look at me. The scapegoat is the one who, as a young kid, early on, you can't really be a scapegoat. You don't have a role before the age of 6. You're just getting programmed. But they're the one who stick the finger in the light socket and look at you to see if you notice. Okay? So that's the scapegoat. And then the last one we have. Oh, thanks. It was the lost child role. See what I did there? Pretty hard to stay humble when you're this funny. Okay. Now, the lost child's goal is to be not noticed, not found. The lost child, they're often neglected, often overlooked, and they love it and hate it. It's a place of safety. It's a place of wanting to get away from something that seems untenable. And a lot of times what really happens is the lost child looks around at that family system we were talking about and says, I don't like this. I don't like that. In fact, I don't like any of you. If you ask a lost child if they ever wondered if aliens dropped them off, they'll tell you yes. And they'll look at you like, how the hell did you know that? They'll be very impressed with your clinical prowess. You say, when you were a kid, did you ever think maybe just like somebody dropped you off at the front door and nobody told you like that these were not your people? They'll be like, totally, all the time. Thank you. And again, this will be a thing for a lot of people. You get a recognition reflex, and there's tremendous relief. And finally putting words to the concept like, oh man, this didn't fit for me. These folks, my family system, it didn't really fit. So are we understanding the lost child and the scapegoat, the mascot, the mediator, the hero? Question.
The lost child is gonna be the one that's detached, has attachment issues a lot of times, right? And adulthood maybe?
So attachment issues and neglect are sort of a different thing. We think of this as an adaptation, but it has somewhat of a choice element to it. There's almost always going to be profound neglect with a lost child, but it's a slightly different process, right? You can be a lost child without a lot of neglect. And you can get neglected and not choose a lost child role. Make sense?
The lost child is kind of the disengagement too, right? Like just hiding out in the room.
Or if they get older, hiding out at a friend's house. If there are people down the street, you know, if any of you have ever, maybe when you were a kid, you were sort of adopted by some neighbors, or you had neighbors who adopted kids, or your parents or family like sort of, oh, come on over, Johnny, you can have dinner at our house and just stay here. Okay, it's dark, you probably ought to go home. That kind of thing, that a lost child just finds someplace else to be outside the family system. Detachment is very much the theme and the idea as far as the survival mechanism goes for the lost child.
So what about the like the family that's basically bad? Their parents are on drugs, they're unemployed, or yeah, nothing good happening. How does that throw off all these roles?
Great question. In reality, you will oftentimes see roles like this in a family like that. Not always, but even in a family where there's a lot of neglect. Let's say I have 3 or 4 kids. Actually, I can think of a client right now. Okay, family system similar to what I said before. There's 2, big gap, and 2 more. Oldest boy realizes really early, about 5 actually, about 5 years old, he has somebody confront him with a weapon in his front yard. Okay, and he manages to get out of it. But he has the experience of no one's here for me but me. I'm going to take care of this. And he's got a little brother. So he does this, okay? And he takes great care of his little brother. Interestingly enough, you would think in a family system like that, the little brother would show up as very neglected. Not actually the case. Sometimes a sibling can be a surrogate caregiver to such a degree that I can come out of things with relatively healthy level of attachment. In this case, the sibling somehow had it on himself to not move in that direction, and they both ended up doing all right. Now, the latter 2 have suffered tremendously later in life as a result of the chaos and craziness that's happening in their lives. What you find in a situation like that is you're much more likely to have some of the lost child elements to it. And we're going to talk in a second about how these roles intermingle. You'll find a lost child element to all of these roles here, right? I want to spend just a few more minutes talking about how the roles manifest themselves. So the thing with this is it's a lifestyle thing. It'll show up in every possible way when it shows up. So if I have a lost child as a client, they're going to present as disheveled, kind of all over the place. And you'll forget their name and not know why. Even if you're really good with names, this particular client, you'll just be like, man, I cannot remember this guy or gal's name. I don't know what it is. On an unconscious level, they're constantly telling you, don't see me, don't see me, don't notice me. They shrink. Okay? In the group setting, they're really effective at not saying anything, and they're really effective at kind of disappearing. And their clothes will reflect that. They'll show up. Sometimes they'll show up with clothes that are a little dirty, unkempt, whatever it is for them. They don't want attention. A scapegoat will show up with a bunch of stuff that says, if you mess with me, you will regret it. One of the most common characteristics of a scapegoat is visible tattoos. Now, it's less so in the culture now because tattoos, back in the day, it was like a guaranteed thing. Nowadays, it's not necessarily that way, although a lot of times you'll find a big hunk of scapegoat underneath somebody who has chosen to present themselves with visible tattoos. The more visible, the more scapegoat-like. If you have a tattooed finger, your fingers are, if you have tattoos up here where a nice shirt can cover them up, okay, scapegoat might be a secondary role for you. I can think of one person I know, she's a therapist, she has like 25 tattoos. She goes to work in a short sleeve shirt or a tank top, you would never know. Every single one of the tattoos, it's above here, below a place that would be covered up. Even in informal settings, she can pass, right? So a scapegoat is going to show up in a way that says, and they'll look at you, they'll walk around and they'll look at you, they'll make eye contact, and they're ready to go. Hey, what's going on? That's my chair. I want to sit there. Okay, that's the scapegoat. They show up and they present in that way. A mascot is going to look good and cute. They're going to be catchy and flashy and really interested in your attention. They're going to like their attention. They're going to be made up if they're into makeup. Okay, but they're going to be different than the hero, who's going to also look good, but look good in a much more polished way. Hero is going to show up as polished, put together, and competence. Competence and authority, as opposed to necessary. And attractiveness may be part of that, but it's secondary to competence and authority. Here, I'm going to look good. And a mediator is going to show up in a way sort of similar to a lost child without being disheveled at all. Mediator will be polished and put together and yet not necessarily noteworthy. Okay, I'm here and I know exactly if business casual is the attire, I have business casual attire. I look nice, well put together. I'm certainly not going to create any kind of disruption. And I am ready to fit in. And that's what the mediator's attire will say as they walk into the environment. Okay, so we see that these things kind of bleed into all sorts of different areas and aspects of our lives and our clients' life. Now, here's where things start to get pretty interesting, because again, nobody says, well, I am 100%, maybe some people do. Very few people are 100% any of the roles. It's really much more of a pie chart, okay? Maybe you're 50% this one, 30% this one, and then the other, one you don't have hardly any of, and the other two are a little bit similar to attachment styles. Now, here's the other thing that's really interesting. There are certain times in a person's life when a role tends to either be chosen for them or when they pick one. And it has to do with developmental stages of, we don't have time to get into great depth with the developmental stages, so we're just going to do a broad overview. From 0 to 6, conceptually, this is a pretty important concept, okay? From 0 to 6, person is a blank hard drive. In the very, very beginning, we're putting an operating system on it. That's with infancy, particularly the first 18 months. First 9 months, it basically needs to stay in the womb. Human beings probably should stay in the womb a little longer, but you get into some real challenges because at some point the head gets so darn big, a woman can't pass them through. You ever wonder why we're born? I mean, we're born like a horse is born and it can run right away. Everything else in the world is born and it can move right away. Why do we get born and be completely, basically useless for about the first 7 or 8 months? Okay, why? Well, in theory, if you look at evolutionary psychology, the theory is that the human head got so big because our brains got so big. The human head got so big that you couldn't pass it successfully through a human body anymore. I mean, 9 months is just about all it could take, and that's the maternal body evolved in some really funky ways that wouldn't make it effective to escape it back. Anyway, long story short, 0 to 6, you're a blank hard drive, particularly in the very beginning, we get the operating system, and then we start getting software programs. We absorb software programs through our environment. We are nonverbal. Okay, so what our parents say to us makes very little difference. It's energetic, profoundly energetic, to the point of being what we might call psychic at some level later on. There's an intuitive understanding of what's happening energetically that little kids have. They absorb significant stuff out of their environment. And the older they get, the more verbal they become. Even at 5 or 6 years old, you're really only very, very beginning. Piaget actually is the theoretician to study if you want to understand what people can do at which age. It's all really, really interesting. But 0 to 6, blank hard drive, you don't really have a role that you're picking here. Okay, you're just showing up to the best of your ability, and your behavior is always reactive, and it's reactive to your environment. And you will start to show signs. It'll often you'll have sort of signs and significant issues. But the big one around the age of 6, from 6 to 12, you're going to pick your first role. And from 6 to 12, you're trying to figure out how to make things work in this family system. That is your entire world. Your entire planet is these people. You got a couple of buddies at school, and the older you get, the less this is the case. But particularly early on, you have some friends you play with at school, but that family system is the crucial piece. So what works best for me, given my particular family system? Okay, I'm an oldest child. My dad's addicted to drugs. My mom is sometimes super attentive and sometimes focused on trying to make up for what my dad is doing. I have two younger siblings. Well, a hero might fit pretty well for me in this family system because if I'm an oldest female, I probably need maybe mom turns to me to take care of the other kids, and I can be a mother to these kids, and that gives me a sense of significance. The significance idea is the crucial element, the role we play in the family system. We want a sense of significance. Nobody wants to be nobody. Not even the lost child, believe it or not. They only take nobody because it's the safest way to go. So the sense of significance is really, really important to plotting out which role I'm going to play. And I'm going to take my first initial role around the age of 6, and I'm going to play that in my family system. And then from 12, more or less ad infinitum, unless there's a major crisis or traumatic event, I'm going to take my second role. And this will play out quite a bit. And so these roles are going to blend together around here. And I'm gonna give you some examples of this. Okay, so I have a client who, eating disorder clients, follow a relatively predictable isn't exactly the right word. And you can. I'm not an expert in eating disorders. The ones I have worked with, many of them have followed a pattern similar to this. I start out, and maybe let's say I have a father who's very driven and kind of absent, and a mother who's very much a performer and is very interested in image management and stuff like that. Okay, so that's going to look like some enmeshment on the mom side, disengagement. By the way, the other fun thing about that family system dot is it can vary depending on which parent you're talking about too. So I got a mom who's a little neglectful, dad's a little neglectful, a mom who's maybe a little bit enmeshed, but in an image conscious kind of way. And I'm going to show up as a hero here. And that's going to be my thing. I'm going to show up and I'm going to look good. And that's what I'm going to do until I'm about 12. And then when I'm about 12, now a couple things happen. One, biologically, I can survive on my own now, maybe. And so I'm going to start to develop some independence. And here's the other really interesting thing. I'm going to experiment and act out a little bit. And what I'm going to notice is that this drives my image conscious parent crazy. And now, guess what? What's the biggest benefit of being a scapegoat? Freedom and power. Who has the power in a family system? The scapegoat has 100% of the power in a family system. So as soon as I start acting out, especially if I'm an image conscious family system, holy moly, now it's negative attention. But man, they can't take their eyes off you. Whereas before, maybe you're a middle child or something like that, you got to fight for it. As soon as you start doing this thing, everybody is focused on you. You have a tremendous amount of power. Another example. So alcoholic dad comes home from the bar. It's Friday night. It's 10 p.m. Okay. The hero says, "Hey, old man, it's so good to see you. I'm so glad you're here. Come on in. Did I mention I was promoted to be the editor of the yearbook today? I'm really excited about it. And also, I'm captain of the football team." And he says, "Oh, good job, boy." Hero says, "Come on in. Sit down on the couch." Mediator says, "Hi, Dad. So good to see you. Let me get you a blanket." Mascot says, "Hey, Daddy." By the way, always says Daddy, not Dad. Mascots almost always have a pet name or a nickname. It's not Nick. Certainly not Nicholas. It's Nicky. Okay. Heroes actually, not always, but often will go by their full name. Gregory, not Greg. Not always, but often. "Oh, hey, Dad, let me show you this cute dance I can do. Let me make you laugh and giggle." Lost child isn't there. Lost child figured out what was going on about 4 hours ago. He's either up in his room, in the treehouse out back, or at a friend's house. Long gone. Long gone. Dad was expected at 6. At 6:15, that lost child is out of here. And the scapegoat says, "Hey, you old bastard. Did you drink away all the rent money again?" Right? To the horror of everyone else. Record scratch stop, music stops, everybody goes, right? And what did the old man do? Well, he beats the holy heck out of him. He does, screams and shouts. Scapegoat screams and shouts right back, says, They just go at it with each other. Why? Ever seen Good Will Hunting? You've seen the movie Good Will Hunting?
Yeah.
Good Will Hunting. He's hanging out with Robin Williams, and he says, "Yeah, my dad came. One of my foster dads came in, and he stepped down and he gave me a wrench and a switch and a belt. And he said, 'What's it going to be today, Johnny?' Whatever his name. 'What's it going to be today?' Robin Williams says, you took the belt, right?" And Matt Damon says, "No, I took the wrench because fuck him."
I've said that in group, I've used that, I've thrown that in group like a fucking time. Yeah, I swear to God, that's awesome.
That's the ultimate scapegoat line. Okay? It is much more fun. If you're going to sit, why would you sit at the table for an hour and wait to get beat up when you could just decide yourself, I'm going to be the one to get beat up. I know it's going to happen eventually, so I'm going to choose to have it happen now. I have the power.
Like,
No one else has the power.
Breakfast Club is another movie that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Rebel, what's his name? He's like,
Yeah, you
yeah,
asked
thank you for serving. I have another. Well, Leo Nuss was the jock.
Oh, just kidding. Sorry.
The scapegoat's is a truth teller.
Oh, big time.
Oh.
When they want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, the scapegoat will always tell you the truth when you wish they wouldn't, but not if it implicates them or bothers them somehow. At that point, they're quite willing to keep their mouth shut. The other thing about the scapegoat is they're often the first one into recovery because they actually see the truth. The hero doesn't see their own, they don't see their own pride, they don't see their own arrogance, and they often are the last ones to identify how jacked up the family system is.
Right.
Mediators and mascots, all these desired roles will defend the family system, sometimes literally to the death.
And is it a scapegoat also like, based on the role, the situation you described? It sounds like a scapegoat is actually taking on a hero role.
That's what I'm
To
saying.
benefit the parts of the system.
Sure.
You know, like kind of like older one come home and like yell in mom's face, going after one of his brothers.
Oh, yeah,
You
no.
know, that I'm gonna step in and still like fucking throw something at his head. So now I'll take the ass whooping and go toe to toe, but everyone else doing that.
Yeah, so that can show up that way too. So I'm conscious of time. Unfortunately, we're running a little bit low. But the other thing to understand is your first role might be hero. And a lot of us who are scapegoats can identify with that. And maybe from 6 to 12, up to 6th grade, you were rocking it, man. You get your homework in on time, you do your best. And then all of a sudden, one day, about 12 years old, a switch flipped, and you were like, oh, fuck this. Fuck. Boom, off they go. I had a client one time, she was 15 years old. I'll wrap up with this story. She's 15 years old. Her mom wasn't home, so she decided she would do the dishes. And so she did the dishes. Her mom came home, picked up the dishes, saw that she did them, and broke one on the wall because it had a spot on it. This 15-year-old girl had been here up to this point. 2 weeks later, she had her first drink and lost her virginity at the same party. And this woman, by the time she got to me, was 60. She had never done any therapy and was a hardened alcoholic because she had become a scapegoat in the family system. Why? Because hero didn't work. There's no significance in being a hero here. Well, how about we try the anti-hero and see how that works? Wow, everybody notices me now. No, old man, you will not ignore me ever again. Make sense?
Yeah.
So
Too much.
the lot. Now, the next question is, why is this valuable? Well, it's intrinsically valuable to have some of this information simply because, and you guys are all having that experience now of like some paradigm shifting. Human beings love the experience of sort of a cascade of events. Actually, Robert McGee wrote a book called Story, and it's the Bible of screenwriting. And in the book Story, he analyzes what makes a great screenplay. And his quintessential thing is Return of the Jedi. Darth Vader says, I am your father. And all of a sudden, everything that's happened up to that point shifts. People love that experience, particularly people in early recovery who want to understand how they got here. So that's the benefit of this. The other benefit of it is, do you think you approach therapy differently for a hero versus a scapegoat?
Oh, yeah.
Damn right. You absolutely have a completely different approach for a mediator, a mascot, or a lost child is a good one. Lost children will cling to whatever little nuggets of love they were given hard. They're often the last ones to really get what happened to them, to get how desolate their life was. So there's a whole different approach when I got somebody with a bunch of lost child trauma. Okay. Scapegoat will fight you and argue with you. Really from the beginning of the discussion today. A couple of you were like, so some of you have known me a while and you're like, oh, okay, cool, we'll get to try. Some of the newer folks are going to be like, we'll see about this shit. I'm not 100% sure about this guy. Okay, there's a skepticism attached to that too. There actually is more depth to this. Okay, we can take this a lot farther. And I might do, again, depending on time, we could do a half hour on each one of these roles and best approaches to each of them. And I think we probably will. But in the meantime, thank you for paying attention and getting an idea of how family systems can work and be of value. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
That was wonderful.
Great.